For those of you who are of a boomer generation, 1 in every 50 baby boomer women will live to the age of 100. But if you think about that for a minute, how many of us have really planned to live into our 80s, our 90s, or 100? This is what happens when we're thinking about where we need to live and how we're going to live for the second half of our lives. And the mistake that a lot of families and a lot of caregivers make is choosing a certain living environment that isn't going to be the place that we can stay long term. And a lot of psychologists and a lot of physicians tell us that if you make a lot of transitions and you have to pick up and move and go to a different place because of your care needs changing, it puts a lot of stress and strain not only on the loved one but also on the person who's caring for them. So that's what I call the Goldilocks syndrome. And I said, there's really 3 options when we're thinking about where we want to live or how we want to help our loved one make that decision. Are you going to want to stay in your home? AARP did a survey a couple of years ago that showed 89% of us say, yep, I want to stay in my home, living there as long as possible and as independently as possible. So that's one option. And there's a lot of things to consider with that. If you wind up living alone, are you the type of person who's going to stay social? Because isolation, as we know from the AARP Foundation, is a big issue as we age. So you want to stay social. We also know that 2 million seniors wind up falling in their home and go into the ER every single year. So falls at home are a huge risk factor if we want to stay in our home. So we have to do things to make it safer. And one of those, the home modification is actually called universal design, where you're starting to change your home and adapt your home so that you can make it a lot easier to live there for a lifetime, free at home. The second option is, should you move in with a family member? So if you are someone who has an older parent or maybe an older aunt, and you're thinking, I don't really want her living alone anymore, maybe I should bring mom into the home, or maybe I should bring dad in the home. Or if you're somebody who is older, what's it going to be like to live with your adult child? Maybe you've got grandkids who are at that age where they're so noisy and rambunctious. Are you really going to want to live in that kind of a home environment? So there are a lot of questions that families need to kind of really think through and talk about so they fully understand how that looks. And of course, the third option is, what are your options with senior living communities and different facilities? And let me tell you, the wonderful thing is that there are so many choices out there now, so many different levels of types of communities that we can choose. There's assisted living, there's also continuing care retirement communities, which are different levels of care. So if you have older parents, let's say, and let's say your father only needs assisted living help, but your mother might need a little bit more help, like a skilled nursing facility or something like that, you can be on the same campus, so they're not really, living that far apart. Those are a little bit more expensive options, but those are the types of things that are out there now. And of course, there's a lot of things for in-home care as well. Here's what I tell a lot of the caregivers that I talk to. It is a tough conversation, but it's one you've got to have. Because if you wait until the crisis hits, then it's really bad, because that is when family conflict happens. That is when you might wind up arguing with your brother that you thought you'd never have an argument with, but you cannot decide together how to care for mom, and maybe she's incapacitated and can't tell you, and you don't know what her wishes were. So it's really, really critical for families to have this conversation, and there's actually a rule that in the caregiving space, if you will, we talk about. It's called the 40-70 rule. If you are 40 years old, or if your parent is 70, you should be having this conversation. And that seems really young. People always say to me, are you kidding me? But nobody's sick yet, but nobody's old enough yet to have that conversation. That's the point. You want to have it now, when it can be a thoughtful discussion, when your loved one can be engaged in the discussion. You don't want to wait until mom has a diagnosis of dementia and may not be able to really tell you what she wants.